activist on YouTube. You can watch his channel as well, and see what else trying to share in with regard to Palestine. Assalamu alaikum, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today regarding latest in the region and especially in Palestine. I'm really grateful for your time. How would you like to share your thoughts, especially how is everything going in Palestine at the moment? Because ceasefire deal was about to finish and all that. So, what are the most important updates related to Palestine you would like to share with us?
Good morning, Faizan. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, everybody. I suppose what I'd really like to say is what's happening in Palestine. If we look at the West Bank, you can see that what we have is the Gaza Mark II. You have the ethnic cleansing of towns and cities and farms and villages all over the West Bank. It's reminiscent of the Nakba from 1948, which has continued from 1948 through 1967 and continues on to today in 2025. The Israelis don't want to, and never did want to fully comply with the ceasefire that they agreed to, that politically and militarily they sat down with the Americans, the Qataris, the Egyptians, and the resistance in Gaza. What the Israelis always do is they give as little as possible during the negotiations and then implement as little as possible of those negotiations when it actually comes to honouring their part of the agreement. So they've turned off all the electricity. I saw something on the internet yesterday or the day before talking about young babies potentially at risk of death in incubators. So you have all these newborn babies in Gaza, and there's no water, there's no food, there's no gas, there's no electricity, there's no diapers, there's no cleaning material, there's probably no new clothes for newborn babies. So we're witnessing a continuation of the genocide in Gaza, that being extended into the West Bank. If you go slightly further, then, if you go into Syria, what's happening in Syria is unconscionable. To put it in a context, you've seen the fall of the Assad government. You've seen it replaced by these Takfiri mercenaries, and many of them are not even from Syria. It's kind of 50%, or from Uzbekistan, and Uyghurs from China, and people from Saudi Arabia and the Gulfs. And basically, you have what a lot of people are now beginning to kind of recognize or see in these Takfiri terrorists. They're almost a mirror image of Zionism. If you look at Zionism as a political ideology, if you look at the greater Israeli project and the expansion of the Zionist entity, you witness a mirror, optics, really, of that with these Takfiri terrorists. These people who want to create a caliphate, which is what they tried to do through ISIS and tried to do through Al Qaeda. I mean, they want a greater caliphate as much as the Zionists want a greater Israel. They are allies of Zionism. Whenever Giuliani came to power, one of the first things he said was, our enemies are not the Israelis, our enemies are Hezbollah and Iran. And because of his sectarian nature, his sectarian bloodthirsty history, this man is a sectarian bigot who has been placed in power by finances from Saudi Arabia and possibly Qatar. The majority of all the people that are in his non-elected government have Turkish passports. So really you have a combination of Turkey uh, politically leading this Takfiri government of Giuliani. You have Saudi Arabia and Qatar financially backing this group of mercenaries. You have the total balkanization of Syria. So one third has been occupied and maybe possibly annexed by Israel. You have another third. I mean, the Kurds were armed both by the Americans but initially by the Syrian Arab army in order to protect themselves from these Turkish incursions. I mean, it was Turkey that let all these Takfiris in. They had an open border to let all these murderous thugs enter Syria. We're watching the genocide, sadly, of the Alawite population in the coastal areas. But there has been a plan. There always is a plan in the background, and that plan was to, first of all, regime change in Syria. Syria was a bulwark against Zionism in the region. It was a bulwark against American imperialism and European hegemony in the area. So they've got rid of the Syrian Arab Republic. They have Balkanized Syria, so it's weakened. Now it's Balkanized. If it will ever rise up again from the ashes of this foreign finance influence directed war on Syria, it's difficult to see. And we've seen the Kurds now throw their lot in with Julani. I saw something that stated that the Kurds are now taking part in either with the government or parallel to this, I would call it an illegal government in Syria. No one's elected it. We're talking about 5 years before there'll be any elections in Syria to allow people to have a democratic vote in who governs them. So Syria's been balkanized. Syria has been weakened. We're watching Öcalan, he's the leader of the Kurds in Turkey. He's been in a Turkish prison for, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 years. He recently came out and said that PKK in Turkey should basically end its armed insurrection in support of their right or their claim for the right to have an independent Kurdish state. And then when you see the SDF, the Kurds, who could not have existed independently without American imperialist support. So the Kurds claim to be socialists, yet they can only survive in that environment with American imperialist backing. They claim that they want a free, independent Kurdistan, but as part of that, they were illegally occupying Syrian towns, Arab towns, changing the education system. So for a socialist group that claims to be anti-imperialist and anti-colonial and fighting for their own sovereign independence, for them to colonize and for them to occupy land that is not seen to be part of a Kurdistan sovereign nation is a form of colonialism. It's a form of imperialism. So I don't really have any time for the Kurds and their call for independence. I saw them as stabbing the Syrian people, the Syrian government, the Syrian Arab Republic, and the Syrian Arab army in the back. De facto, they were the first people to begin the process, supported by the West, of the balkanization of Syria. So you have these sectarian murderers, there's no other way to describe them, who are walking into people's homes of Alawites, not only in the coastal regions, but in Damascus and all over Syria that's controlled by HTS. So they're not confronting Zionisms, they're not confronting Israel's illegal occupation of both the Golan Heights and now up to 1/3 of Syria. They are attacking innocent, unarmed civilians in a sectarian, hate-filled, uh, passionate, believe it or not, murder of innocent people because they see them as being the other. So the way the Zionists have murdered people in Gaza is mirrored by the way HTS, supported by Turkey, America, the EU, and others. Britain just gave £50 million to Julani. I don't know how much of that will be seen by the Syrian population, how much of that will go into infrastructure. Uh, that were all bought and paid for mercenaries. All the people in Syria who fought against the Syrian Arab Republic were paid mercenaries from all corners of the world who were there specifically to destroy Syria, to balkanize Syria, to weaken Syria as an attack upon the axis of resistance, and for them to now ignore the genocide being visited upon the Alawites in Syria, is a perfect example, not of hypocrisy and not of duplicity. It's a perfect example of how the West divides and conquers the Ummah, divides and conquers any nation which is put under economic sanctions, which are designed to destroy the economy, which is in turn designed to turn the people against a government which is not in alignment with EU and American foreign policy. So we have the destruction of Syria in front of our eyes. We have the balkanization of Syria. We have the genocide against the Alawi and also the Christians. And let us never forget that Giuliani and his jihadist cohort used the phrase that Christians should go to Beirut and the Alawi should go to the tomb. So this is what they're doing. Christians are fleeing. The Alawites who don't have the opportunity to flee are being massacred, and the West is sitting back, giving Giuliani money, inviting him to Saudi Arabia, inviting him to France, inviting him to meet with Gulf monarchs and also with Western leaders in order to legitimize an illegal, usurping uh, identity and entity that has stolen Syria from the Syrian people. And we're now watching the streets run with blood like they did in Idlib when it was under ISIS and under Jalani and under Al Qaeda and under Al Nusra before. This is Western imperialism. This is the naked face of Western imperialism. It doesn't matter how many Syrians or how many Palestinians or how many Lebanese die, because the goal of the West is total control over the resources of the region, and that includes the indigenous populations of every country in West Asia and the Ummah in its entirety.
Thank you, Farah, for explaining the situation in Syria and Gaza and ceasefire deal. Sister Sakina, you have heard what Farah has explained and shared about the situation in Syria. And last week we did discuss that as well, so, that the kind of power struggle going on over there and the kind of painful situation people are facing over there. I mean, it's horrific, honestly speaking, the way they are attacking innocent lives and killing innocent children and families and everyone. No one is in a safe, place over there. So, how do you see the whole situation, and how do you see the connection of this? Situation of Syria with the Palestine. Do you see any connection between them? And how do you see it would impact on the situation of Palestine and Gaza, whatever is going on over there? And how do you see the relationship of at the moment there are some talks might be going on related to nuclear deals which US wanted to do with Iran, and they said we haven't received any letter. So what are the updates on that as well, if you can share some of the thoughts on that as well, and the kind of situation you would like to add anything about that?
I think Fries explained very well, the situation in Syria and the connections of the Takfiris and the fact that it is fully 100% connected to the Zionist entity. They were put in place. Takfiri was put in place. Now, this is the world we live in, which sometimes, if genuinely you think, you probably are dreaming or this some sort of a nightmare. These are the guys, who were ISIS, and the West was fighting them. Everyone was fighting them, and then he's just changed his garment, and now he's become somebody who is traveling through, like Fra mentioned, EU invited him. He's meeting all these Arab nations and everything. And the connection with Israel has always been there. We know that ISIS at that time, initially, when they attacked in Iraq and in Syria, when they were, injured, they used to be treated in, across the border in Israel. And these connections are not something that are hidden. This is something which is a well-known fact. So whatever is happening in Syria is very much connected, because he's been put there for the Zionist and the Western interest. But however, for me, the Syrian issue, the biggest problem I have with the Syrian issue is it's horrific. What's happening there is horrible. But genuinely, what is really disappointing is the way this has divided the Muslim Ummah in particular. You know, the Western ideals. This is something that the British excelled at. You know, throughout the colonial times, about dividing and ruling. You know, divide and rule is something that they've always done, and the Sunni Shia divide has always been played out. The sad thing is that we still buy it. You know, like hook, line, and sinker. People around the world. Now, countries, the Arab countries, you know, Qatar, for example, I think is hugely implicated in that, because Al Jazeera is one of the news channels that is actually advocating and causing a lot of this. It's got blood in its hands, really, and not just Syria. You know, I've been listening to some accounts of people from Libya who were talking about how they were misled by Al Jazeera about Gaddafi, and you know, they painted him in the same negative light, as a result of which, you know, he met his fate. But that's because you know, Gaddafi saw through them from very early on. He used to warn about this whole scheme of the Zionists working with a nation such as Qatar. So I think you know, it's for the Muslims globally. And this is particularly, I think, within Muslims. I think people who are not Muslims are able to see the clearer picture, in my view, because you know, the atrocities are so horrendous that it's an issue of human rights, whether they are Muslims or not, or people of no faith. It does not matter. You cannot treat another people in this manner. But for
Hmm.
Muslims, they have bought into the Sunni Muslim, and I'm sorry to say this because I advocate greatly, you know, the unity of Muslims, and I have always said that we do not need to talk about Shia Sunni, but in this particular instance, a lot of our Sunni brothers are actually buying into this ideology of the Al Jazeera and thinking that this is a khilafah. They have been misled to think that Turkey has put these guys in place to go and liberate Palestine. I mean, it is so weird. And no matter how much you try and explain to them and show to them how the dots don't connect, people have bought this story, which for me is a bigger problem. The ideology of how you know, people are buying into these propagandas. This really upsets me. Now, when it comes
That's
to
true.
yeah, when it comes to Palestine, we know that there is a new ceasefire that you know, the US has put on the table. Again, you know, 42 to 60 days extension. We don't need extensions. We need to move into the next stage. We need to work towards permanent peace over here. But the difficulty is, we know that, you know, Trump, even though he is not like other presidents who were so strongly within the camp of the Zionists, but he still is. I mean, he's all the money that he received for his election. You know, people who surround him are all Zionists, and the proof of this we saw at the you know, recently, when the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East he met with the Hamas, and he literally on CNN just talked about that these were not bad guys, and he has been removed from his position. So the hold of the Zionists on the U.S. administration, you know, is so clear for everyone to see. And I think I found very interesting what Jeffrey Sachs recently talked at the European Union. Now, this is a, you know, American economist and a public policy guy who is also a professor at Columbia University. But most importantly, he has worked with people from around the you know, globe. He's worked in the American administration. He's worked in Europe. He's worked with Syria. You know. All Arab countries. So he's an insider. He knows how things work. Sometimes when we talk about how, for example, you know, the Zionists control a lot of things, it sounds like it's a you know, we're just creating conspiracy theories. But this is a guy who is working within this system. He's working with these people, and he said very clearly at the European Union in his speech that for the past 30 years, American foreign policy in the Middle East has been you know, being run by Netanyahu. It has been given to Netanyahu, and he is calling the shots on how things happen. So it is obvious, completely obvious, of, you know, why we are seeing the kind of world we are seeing in. Now, coming to Iran, Iran is the biggest threat, for Israel. There were five countries that was earmarked, again mentioned by Jeffrey Sachs, five countries to maintain the hegemony of the United States. This was a policy since past 30 years has been to remove five countries, and one of them is Iran. Iran is a thorn, for them. They're talking about, stopping Iran from developing nuclear, things. And Said Khamenei recently spoke about the fact that if they wanted nuclear power, nobody can stop them. They're capable of doing it. They haven't done it not because of any fear or threats from the West, but because they have their own reasons why they believe that may not be the right time for them to do it. So, and the letter that Trump sent, it has now been, we've heard that yes, that the letter has been received, and that there will be discussions on this letter. But Iran is very clear about the fact that they are not going to be having any negotiations with America at the moment, not in the condition at the moment whereby there is this maximum pressure. You need to talk to someone, you got to come down to a level of equal partners. Excuse me. So
It's okay.
I think, yeah, I'll take a moment while Franz speaks, and I'll come back.
Yeah, that's fine. Farah, what are your thoughts? What sister is saying, and how do you see the situation regarding nuclear talks between Iran and, US? And do you think any attack might be coming in future from Israel towards Iran on their nuclear sites or something like that, or it's just a rumor, or it's just a kind of threat they are trying to pose on Iran just to pressurize them or something like that? And how do you see?
Yes, thank you. Maybe the first thing I'd like to say is regarding the ceasefire, ongoing ceasefire, phase one. Obviously, so
Mhm.
long as phase two isn't introduced, what you're going to have is a continued military occupation of Gaza by Israel, which is what they want to do. They want to continue the occupation. They believe in annexing Gaza. They believe in putting the Gazans out. They believe in the strength of the siege and the sanctions as a campaign of slow death, which is what it is. We've seen babies dying born in the winter. We've seen the tents blowing away in the wind. We've seen the exposure of people who need heart tablets, diabetes tablets, blood pressure tablets. All these people who are dying unnecessarily because of the Israeli genocidal policies on Gaza, who aren't necessarily included in the war dead because they have not been shot or eviscerated or blown to pieces or potentially starved to death. So their plan is to continue the occupation, and this whole idea of 40 days or 60 days will become 100 days, it will become 200 days. That is the kind of pressure, and that is a political that the Israelis and the Americans are jointly pursuing. When it comes to Iran, I was in Iran over Christmas and the New Year, and people there were speaking about whether or not Iran should have a nuclear deterrent. And there is a fatwa that was put out by Khomeini stating basically, I'm going to paraphrase what I believe was said, that the use of nuclear weapons is immoral because it kills the innocent along with the combatants. And according to Islamic theology, then the use of nuclear weapons is prohibited. And that is why I would imagine so far there has been no real desire within the Iranian government and the Iranian theological Islamic circles to get a nuclear device. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. Without a nuclear deterrent, they are open to conventional attack. They are also open to nuclear attack by the Israelis, who have these smaller nuclear devices that can eviscerate a town or a city. Uh, you have potentially an American threat in the background. Now, we all know the capabilities of the IRGC. We all know that they have these hypersonic missiles. We all witnessed Operation True Promise 2, where they actually were able to. The Iron Dome was created for short distance missiles. It was created actually as a bulwark against the Lebanese resistance. It cannot defend against hypersonic ballistic missiles. So, uh, what you have is a conventional power base in Iran that could, I would imagine, create devastation on Israel militarily and on the docks and on the ports. Because if the Iranians, like Hezbollah and like others, like the Russians in Ukraine, only focus on military targets and not civilian targets, they have the opportunity to inflict heavy damage on the Israeli military infrastructure. So I don't think Trump wants war, but that's just my opinion. I'm glad I'm not in Iran having to make these decisions. I made the point in Iran that if I had a dog in my home and someone came to visit and they said to me, "Does your dog bite?" I would say, probably no, you'll be fine, but it's your choice to enter my home. That's how I look upon a nuclear deterrent by Iran. If Iran had a nuclear deterrent, but also had a fatwa saying they wouldn't use it, every nuclear country, every nuclear power states that their weapons are defensive. They are not offensive. They are there to protect their state against basically an overarching, overriding conventional attack. And the idea is that if your country is being destroyed, as a last resort, you may use the nuclear option, plus the idea that America won't use nuclear bombs on Russia, or Russia will use nuclear bombs on America. You have the same in North Korea. You have the Israelis armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, which they refuse to state publicly they have. You have Pakistan as a nuclear power. You have India as a nuclear power. You have China as a nuclear power. You have Britain. You have most of Europe as nuclear powers. Personally, I feel there's no reason why Iran should not have a nuclear deterrent. And just because the analogy I have with the dog is people will think twice about it's not only bombing Iran, you're talking about an occupation. You're talking about a physical troops potentially on the ground, and Iraq Mark II, with an American, Israeli, Saudi, British, European potential attack on Iran with the shock and awe that they did in Iraq. Now, Iran is in a far superior military position than Iraq ever was, but they are still subject to political, financial, economic sanctions. People referred to the economic sanctions when I was there, how difficult things could be economically for people on the ground. But it is the right, and it is the duty of the Iranian government to protect Iranian national sovereignty and to protect its people against foreign and internal aggression. Because I would imagine before the West would attack Iran, they would encourage and finance and arm these groups and maybe have an invasion from Iraq onto Iran. So there's so much there. It's difficult to know where things will go, but I genuinely believe that one of the Iranian retired generals said that they would go after Lebanon, then they would go after Syria, then they would go after Iraq in order to isolate Iran. Like 15 months ago, if they had attacked Iran, you would have had the resistance in Gaza, you would have had Syria, you would have had Lebanon, you would have had Yemen, and possibly Iraq come to the defense of Iran. But you have Gaza militarily occupied, you have southern Lebanon militarily occupied, you have HTS, a friend of Zionism, on the border of southern Lebanon as a dangerous potential second front. I was speaking to someone, I didn't know this before, that apparently HTS had been involved in border incursions and tried to invade potentially southern Lebanon between 2015 and 2019. So there are all kinds of threats. They're trying to isolate Iran. I suppose the one saving grace is that we witnessed China and Russia and Iran hold their joint naval exercises. Now that's sending a signal to everyone, but ideally Iran should have a security cooperation pact with both China and Russia, like NATO's Article 5, a mutual defence contract. If that was in place, that would secure Iranian security going forward.
Thank you, Farah, for sharing your viewpoint. So, Sakina, what would you like to share, especially Trump plans for Gaza and the current situation, how it's going? Do you think he would be able to execute his plan for West Asia with a success? Because as you were earlier discussing regarding especially the people how they buy Zionist agenda very easily, especially in Muslim community overall. So, how important it is for the common people on ground around the globe, especially the Muslims, whether they are Shia or Sunni or from any other sect, that they would be able to understand the current situation in a proper way. Any special way you think they should be able to analyze the situation? Any, because sometimes the critical thinking everyone doesn't have that sometimes, and common people come and see news and they say no, they are 100% right, this is something what is going on, because lie is something which is propagated in such a way that it looks like a truth. So that kind of wisdom and basira, how important it is for the Muslim community, because leadership we have seen, they are obviously pro-Zionist, they are obviously strengthening them. And how do you see the role of Britain and America to work together for the genocide going on in not only in Gaza but in in Syria at the moment as well? And what do you think that they are what is going on with excess of resistance, how they are going to deal with that, and what kind of role at the moment in, for example, Hezbollah, Hamas, and all these groups, the kind of and the Yemen, all these groups, the kind of role at the moment they are playing. What do you see out of that role? What they are doing, what they are up to, and what this silence is saying at the moment, or where the situation is heading? Do you think?
Okay. So let's start with Trump's plan for Gaza. I think he's taken a back step on that one. He has recently talked about the fact that no one's removing people from Gaza. I don't think this was ever something that was doable. I think Trump throws in things over there to kind of gauge responses, to challenge people, to see how the reaction is. And obviously, without a doubt, the reaction against the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians has been very strongly condemned around the world. And now he's taken a step back. I've always said that I don't think this is practical. I mean, speaking to Palestinians, many, often that I do, these aren't the people who are really willingly going anywhere. And even you really would have to find a manpower, boots on the ground, to push them out, which just doesn't look very practical. Because also, we've talked about the Israeli army. You know, these are diaper army. They're very good at throwing drones and stuff, but put them on the ground. You know, they cannot fight against these. Palestinians. So I don't think this was ever practical, but I think he was just throwing it in the mix. So I don't believe that there is the plans. You know, the Egypt has come up with a plan on how to rebuild Gaza. But to be honest, you know, these are all talks. The reality is that as long as the occupation is in place, what are you going to rebuild? You will rebuild, and then they will do the same thing over and over again. And the main issue at the moment is, even though we don't really, personally, I don't believe that a two-state solution is viable, because Israel will never be able to respect, a state, Palestinians, and leave the control. And also, it isn't their land. It never was their land. So they do not have a right to have a state over there. Now, this is not saying that we don't think Jews have a right to be in Palestine. They have coexisted. Jews, Christians, Muslims have always coexisted, and they have a right to live there. However, this is under the one state solution, which, for example, we saw in South Africa, how people from different, ethnic and racial grounds came together under one state, and the same thing can happen. But even if we talk about the two-state solution, and if this was something that could be viable, and if this is what Palestinians want, who are we to say what should happen to them? This is their decision. So if they are up to it and this is bringing them peace, it is really their decision. And I think any nation will support that if that is what Palestinians themselves want. So I see all these Arabs talking about the reconstruction. At this stage, it just sounds like gimmick to me. I don't think there is anybody really serious in doing something, because if they were, they would have been there already. um, Israel has closed, in the month of Ramadan, they have now closed aid going in. They have closed, they have cut off electricity. They're talking about stopping water. The dire situation that exists, the human beings, the way they are being treated. All these Arabs who are talking about helping Gaza and rebuilding, where are they at the moment? Why can't they fight this first and foremost? So I don't, in terms of the Palestinian issue, I don't see a solution anytime soon. I think there will be a lot of words, unfortunately, but I don't think that there is anything massive that's going to change in the short term. Longer term is another issue. Now,
Thank
talking about Iran,
you.
very quickly. We talked about, yes, the nuclear weapons and them possessing it, and I think there is a clause whereby this is something that can possibly happen if the situation demands. But that is only one aspect. Iran has got other tools, and if the US, I think, would make the mistake of bombing Iran, the first thing Iranians have said is that they are going to close the Straits of Hormuz, and the Houthis in Yemen will probably close the Gulf of Aden at the same time. What does this mean? This means that, for example, me and you cannot fill up our cars. It will be so expensive, the fuel, that we will not be able to manage. And the economies of US and of Europe are already declining. So this would be something that would bury the economy completely. Now, forget about your attachment to, whether you are a pro-Palestinian or not, or who you support, or whether you are Iranian or not. Just as people who belong to this country, just as citizens of Britain, why would we allow our country to be part of something that would collapse our economies? That would mean that we suffer day to day as people in this country. We've already seen at the moment, Keir Starmer has increased military spending. And what has been the first casualty of that? Yesterday, we heard about NHS England being closed down. Now, NHS England, for many who don't know, they support the NHS staff a lot, for example. I know people within my family who work for the NHS England. And this is crucial in what it ends up being in supporting the NHS itself, the staff, the training. And that's the casualty of it, because there is no money, but there is money for military. So I think these are some of the things, we have to think. We have to come out of the boundaries of being Muslim, being Shia, or being any pro anything. Just as citizens of the Western nations, if our countries are committing suicide because of Israel, it is only because of Israel that they want to attack Iran. This is committing suicide, and why should we accept that? So that is something that I think, as a citizen, regardless of which camp you come from, this is something we should be opposing. But also, Iran has mentioned that it's going to attack the bases, American bases. and without American bases, America has got no presence in the Middle East. Sometimes it's almost tempting to hope that that happens, so that they bomb all these bases. But of course, no loss of life is something that we ever advocate for. We always advocate for peace. We do not want to see things getting worse. Overall,
Thank
I
you.
think I just think overall, when we are looking at the bigger picture, um, I think there is something that is different, and I tell you, as a Shia Muslim, and as I can see the vision of Iran and the values of Iran, which makes them as strong as they are right now. For us, for Shia Muslims, whichever way you look at things going, it's only a win-win. If they're attacking the axis of resistance, they would attack Iran. Most likely they will not succeed, because Iran is a very strong country. It's got support of China, it's got support of Russia, but also there is a spiritual presence that is above, that is beyond, that we believe in. We believe in God's help in all this. So that is something that we have confidence in, and we have faith in. But if things were to happen the other way, for example, if Iran was bombed, it's still a win for us. Because what does this mean? It means that the world is aligning towards what we believe is the coming of our Messiah, of coming of our Imam Mahdi, who will come with Jesus Christ. So the world is aligning towards that. So I think this is what maybe the Americans and the Western European countries do not understand this mindset, that you are fighting a people who do not fear that, who do not fear anything, because everything is a win for them. And I think this is something that we as Muslims need to remember. We forget this ourselves. There's many of us lately. Important point I want to make is, I've been hearing these discussions happening within the Shia groups, that we have to observe taqiyya at the moment when it comes to speaking for Palestine or against Takfiris in Syria at the moment. It boggles my mind, seriously. I mean, there is a concept of taqiyya. There are rules around it. There means, but for you to use an Islamic principle to quote, the sayings of the prophets and the imams, to justify your fear, to justify you being complicit by keeping quiet, simply because you want your comfortable life in the West to go on as normal, for you to not get into any trouble, but still claim, oh, we are really good Muslim, we go to mosque and we are fasting in Ramadan and we are staying up in our prayers. Your prayers do not have any meaning if you advocate the deaths of fellow human beings, whichever religion they come from. So I think these are the issues that really we need to grasp. We need to understand the concept of Islam and how closely it's tied to humanity. Fra was talking about Iran's, thought at their own expense of their own security and defense. They are looking at this idea of, nuclear weapons in the context of what it means on humankind, on mankind. These are the values Islam holds. And unfortunately, we Muslims are ourselves forgetting these values. So I think these are very important things for us to reflect on, especially in this holy month of Ramadan, and especially as we come closer to, special nights, the nights of Qadr, which we believe set the path for the whole year to come for us.
Yeah, this is a very important point you raise as well, because sometimes we think spirituality is just mean like sitting in a room and doing their zikr and all that. But spirituality means to stand up for the truth, to stand up against the tyrant, to stand up against the oppression being done around the globe against anyone. And I mean, these are the clear teachings of Quran and Ahlul Bayt and Deen Islam, that if you see anything, even harming nature, like trees or leaves or stuff like that, or the wasting water is not allowed, for instance, then how could it be possible that you say you think you are spiritual and innocent lives are being slaughtered around you, around the globe, in the moment you are doing your huge iftar and stuff like that, but the innocent children are terrified in front of these takfiri and these kind of different groups who are slaughtering and killing these people and families in Syria, and the bombing which is going on in Palestine in general, and every day somebody is being killed and targeted in Palestine, and in Lebanon situation is also very very bad. So how could you call yourself a man of God when you don't even reflect the values of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala related to these situations, stood up against the tyrant, even the worst situation, and even the whole world was against them, but they stood up for that. And being a Shia, especially when it comes to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he stood. Everyone was saying, "Don't. You can go and stay there for a while, and you go and stay there for a while, and you can preach well and this and that." But he said, "No. This is the time. I need to stand up for against the oppression, and Amar bil Maruf and Nahi Anil Munkar is being stopped." And this is something which is at the moment happening, especially in Muslim community. I mean, I wonder like how they could uh, sleep properly during the night in these situations when innocent lives are being killed and hungry and suffering in unlimited ways that we can't even imagine. I mean, one day we didn't have a warm water in our house due to some issue, and it was like there is something huge happened. For instance, it was just a little thing that our hot water supply was not working for few just hours. And think about the people who are under fear, under hunger, under diseases, and they don't know when which bomb or which martyr would come and will kill them and stuff like that, and how their body parts will be used against them and stuff like that. So Farah, there was a situation regarding a US student, I guess, which was being deported in US. I think the student or somebody, 1 minute, Mahmoud Khalil, who was arrested in and deported in US, who was green card holder just because he was, supporting Palestine, I guess. So I'm not sure how well you are aware of that fact, but the things like that, when people who speaks for truth and justice and humanity, and they speak because they have a conscience which is alive, just as a human being. It doesn't matter which religion, color, creed, or place you come from, but if your conscience is alive, you can't you can't tolerate all these because you are responsible. It something tells you from inside. So how do you see the way of silencing people going on in there, and these kind of things we have seen in Germany as well, when people there was environmentalist, I guess, when she was talking about environment it was fine, but the moment she started to speak in favor of Palestine and against the Zionists and the oppressive powers who are supporting through different ways, they just try to silence them. So what are your conclusive thoughts? We have like 5-6 minutes left. How important it is for still standing up for values and truth, because if one has to die, they have to die in whatsoever manner. So why we can't stand up for truth? We are not doing anything. I mean, any one of us is not doing anything except saying truth and standing up for the people who doesn't have voice anywhere. And our voice, well, I mean, we can't take away their pain. They are suffering at the moment. I mean, it's so painful. There's no word which can express the kind of pain they are going through, and they are not being liberated. I mean, how would you like to conclude the whole thing?
Well, the first thing that springs to my mind during your offering that question there was don't shoot the messenger. I mean, this is what always happens in some respects. It's become very dangerous, not for people like me. I don't have a big crowd. I don't have a big following on the internet, so I'm not an influencer. I am not someone who has an opportunity to not convince but to either educate or give people the facts or the truth, as I perceive them, of imperialism and capitalism and colonialism as it devours the world that we are all living in. So it's becoming very dangerous to speak the truth. It's becoming more difficult uh, for people who want to express their truth in countries where they are told that free speech is a cornerstone of the Constitution. So you're allowed to have free speech so long as what you say aligns with the government policy and narrative of the day. So long as you're saying things that are in line with governmental policy, there's no issue. As soon as you begin to contradict, or as soon as you begin to put a light onto the policies being used by your government, by the EU, by America, all of a sudden you become a threat to that narrative. So if we look at mainstream media as a vehicle to cement consensus within society to agree to governmental policies. So, I mean, the Islamophobia across Europe, tying in with the rise of the right, with authoritarian politicians coming to power. Now, Trump is focused potentially on that young man. I think he's from Columbia University. I think they have focused on him because he is the leader. He is the person who stood up. He is the person who is saying to others, we must speak out. He is not saying rise up. He is not saying overthrow the government. He is not saying advocating use of violence. He is simply using his voice to encourage others to hear the truth of the reality of what is being done in their name. Now, he was arrested by ICE. He was taken to another state in America, thousands of miles from his family, from his supporters, from his lawyers, and the people who would represent him within the judicial system. So this is what they do. They take one person in the public domain, they hang them out to dry, and they say to everybody else, "You're next. This potentially is what could happen to you. Stay in your box. Don't contradict the narrative. Don't challenge the government." We witnessed such brutality by, I think it's both the Austrian and the German police, to anyone who carries a Palestinian flag, which I believe is banned in those countries. Why is the Palestinian flag banned within some countries within Europe? Why is anyone who professes the cause, the dignity, and the justice for the Palestinian people seen as a threat to the established order? I'll not go into Zionism, I'll not go into the lobbies, but the impact that a small group of people within society, less than maybe 2% of people in Britain, could be seen as being part of the Zionist lobby, and they have an inordinate effect on governmental policy. So you've had the people in Palestine Action targeted and arrested. You've had Richard Medhurst, you've had Craig Murray, you've had a lady in the northeast of England, apologise, I forget her name, raiding her house, anti-terrorist police at 4 o'clock in the morning to arrest a 70-year-old woman for writing something online. Doesn't advocate violence, doesn't advocate regime change, doesn't advocate anything other than a peaceful, just call for justice and for liberation and for dignity for the Palestinian people. So across you have, I'm just going to touch on this before I finish, the rise of Islamophobia. It is my personal opinion that Zionists, who it is claimed are financing a lot of the right-wing populist groups and individuals across Europe and in Britain and increasingly in Ireland, are trying to use immigration, they're trying to use Islamophobia, they're saying that these people, meaning people of the Islamic faith, are coming here to groom our children, that they were going to have a war with Islam. The Zionists are promoting Islamophobia. They want the new anti-Semitism to become Islamophobia. They want white Christians, mainly in Western Europe, to see the people of Islam as a threat, to see them as terrorists, to portray them as a danger to their uh, homogenous societies. They are trying to create fear of the other, fear of the Muslim, in order to, I believe, create conditions for a potential race war between white Christian Europeans and between the white West and the Islamic East. And you see the attacks on Iraq and Libya and Sudan and Somalia and Syria and many, many, many other places. These are white Christian Europeans and Americans that are bombing brown people in Africa and coloured people in Asia who all happen to be Muslim. So I know it's about imperialism, I know it's about resource theft, I know, I agree with Sakina, it's about divide and rule, and that they use every tool in the box to divide people. But the Zionists, I think, want to see a war between or conflict or I mean, the Europeans talk about civilization, so there's different ways to portray this. The Europeans will call it a clash of civilization between Western civilization and Eastern civilization, between Western progressive values and conservative Asia and conservative East. So that's all part of this idea that they'll have us fighting each other while they sit back and reap the rewards.
Thank you, Farah, for concluding. And Sister Sakina, thank you very much for your time as well. I'm really honored to have you both on the show.